Australian Bitcoin podcast, presented by HardBlock, Australia's first Bitcoin-only exchange.
Hello and welcome to the Australian Bitcoin podcast. Today is the 17th of February, 2025. The Bitcoin price is 96,000 US dollars. And it's been mostly steady for the past fortnight. So nothing exciting there with the price lightly, but a lot of other exciting news. And joining me to discuss the news is Mike, who's our operations manager at HardBlock, and he does the customer verification. How are you, Mike?
Good, Daniel. How you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff happening lately. More good news. It's just like always, the price is steady, but like there's a lot of stuff happening. We've got plenty of things to discuss, and you come up with some stories, like some of the interesting stories that happened over the past fortnight. So, what were some of the exciting things that happened in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of interesting stuff happening. We see the trend continuing of a lot of institutional buy-in around the world, a lot of ETF activity, which, a lot of proper Bitcoiners look at the ETF Bitcoiners with a bit of skepticism, whether it's, real Bitcoin or if it's paper Bitcoin. But there's no doubt that there's a lot of institutional buy-in happening through these ETF channels. And so that we've seen a lot of that in the last few months. And then we're also seeing a lot of interesting stuff happening around, obviously, the Trump administration moving in, and particularly Elon Musk's Doge starting to dig into some of the crazy spending and stuff that we're seeing over in the US government morass that's over there. And one of the more interesting things to come out of that today is not today, but very recently, was the idea of looking at their gold reserves, which a lot of people would be very interested to see that, see what an audit actually looks like of the US gold reserves.
Yeah, if the United States has the gold, they say. Yeah. Okay. So where should we start off from?
Well, maybe let's talk about that. Let's talk about Trump and Doge and Elon, and then focus on the gold stuff. So, for anyone that's not too familiar with what's happening, Trump's come in and he's stirring the pot a bit. He seems to be making good on a lot of his promises that he made in his first presidential term back in 2016, promises to drain the swamp, which didn't really eventuate into anything that first time around. And then he kind of moved out of that office without too much fanfare in that regard. But since he's come back, he seems to be, he's learned his lesson. And now he's obviously got Elon in there as his kind of like an attack dog that he's just kind of sicked on this government system. And the way they're doing it is they've got this sort of crack team of software engineers and developers, mostly young guys in there, just digging through reams of data and information and pulling out all these like absolute absurd things that you can see, like spending on like buying condoms for Gaza, which then get redirected to like Mozambique, and like all these like very bizarre spending things they're doing over there. And the one that I found hilarious was the way that federal government employees' retirements are processed. They're literally taken down to an old limestone mine. It's like this big complex in an old mine where everything is done by hand in these like manila folders and stuff to process federal employee retirements. And it's just absolute absurdity. And it's obviously not going to be limited to just the US government. It starts to ask other questions. What are other governments like? What's the Australian government like?
Yeah, I mean, it makes us like, it brings us like when you see that, like, oh wow, I think a lot of people were surprised. Like everybody was expecting this like Weiss to there, like, but I think like when we actually like when we started posting what we're actually spending off and what percentage of it, just like wow, most people's reaction is, oh wow, this is worse than even the skeptics thought. It's like pretty bad. And and another thing, I'm not sure if you heard about this, but I think this like first thing, I was surprised like I believe like in the United States, the state with the highest per capita income is Washington D.C. Like, and I need to double check this, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. And I was like really surprised by that because I was expecting you'd expect it to be like New York or California or something, but apparently it's like Washington D.C. is the highest capital. I mean, I'm just gonna double Google this really fast. States.
Yeah, look that up because it doesn't make
USA
sense because they're
by
not productive, right? The
GDP.
if you think of Washington DC, they're not actually producing anything. That's just it's government, it's administrative, it's keeping the wheels of government turning over, it's going to
Yeah,
meetings, it's that sort of thing. They're not actually producing anything there, which leads to a lot of
yeah,
people's general dislike of the way the system is set up. In that you've got this unproductive bureaucrats sitting at the top, which they're pulling out these large sums of money, and evidently with the stuff that Doge is finding, there's probably a lot of kickbacks happening, which is probably what's pushing up that number
okay.
that you're looking at.
Yeah, okay. So I've got it on list of states on Wikipedia by GDP, and so by GDP per capita, number one is well basically Washington D.C. The District of Columbia is number one.
Yeah.
It is. So what I said is correct. And it says it's 263,000 GDP per capita, 263,000.
Yeah.
And the second one, like you'd think this is the first one, but it's actually second is New York at 117,000. So I'm just looking at Wikipedia, like correct, somebody fact check me later on, but it seems like
Yeah.
Washington D.C. is twice the GDP per capita of New York, which is the second one.
I'll say some comments on that, and maybe while I'm talking, you can look at Australia. Look at Canberra. Canberra's per capita versus Sydney, Melbourne, and the other state capitals. And yeah, so I said before, it doesn't make sense because these guys, they're not productive. They're bureaucrats. They're government employees. Why are they pulling such large amounts of money out of the system?
Yeah.
And something that's also being discussed now in the light of Doge is there's a story that broke in the last few days, which is showing all these properties getting put on the market in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And people are saying this is an outcome of the Drain the Swamp because all these bureaucrats, suddenly the party's over. They either can't afford all the properties they've got there, or they're selling down because they can get out. And there's increased searches for lawyers and for how to wipe hard drives and to open accounts in Cayman Islands, Swiss bank accounts.
Like for people, like you can Google this at home, fact check us, but like basically the Google trends for things like Swiss bank account and like how to transfer money overseas, like in the last 3 weeks since Elon's doing it, like they just skyrocketed. Like, wow, it's like it's like it almost sounds like a joke. Like it's like, but it's true. And yeah, I was really surprised. But like Washington D.C. has such a high income. Like I guess that's politicians and bureaucrats. Apparently that's like, you think you like going to like, I thought, I went into tech and done engineering when I was young. I thought like this is the future. Like, engineers earn a lot, bankers earn a lot. Turns out no, it's actually bureaucrats and politicians. That's where the money is. But,
as long as you're getting this USAID money, and then you're able to set up in a way where you're getting these kickbacks and stuff, which is undoubtedly what we're going to see more of.
But yeah, and like I'm hoping like Australia is not as bad, but still like we pay very high taxes in Australia. It's a high tax like society, and I mean, it's a high tax society, and we're very like, like if you look at many other like resources, like, and we're very big, we're a very resource rich country. Like, if you look at very other like really like we're relatively small population and a huge amount of resources. Like, if you look at places like Norway, okay, even Russia, like, or like those Middle Eastern countries, many of these like they have really low taxes and like they have good healthcare and everything, all that good stuff, but they have really low taxes. We're like an extremely resource-rich country, and we pay high taxes. I guess our services are decent, like that's fair enough, but still,
Yeah,
it
it's
just
it's
feels
the
like
outcome.
how come? Yeah,
We're a very very socialist nation, and that's where that kind of comes from. All these services that we run, they come with a high cost,
yeah.
and so that's why you do sort of see that happening.
Yeah, I
But
guess what I'm trying to say is how come like we have to pay such high taxes when we're so resource rich? All these other resource rich countries, because they make so
yeah,
much money over resources, they have like really low taxes and like they
well,
provide services
a
on
very
really
good
low.
a very good comparison, I think, is when you compare Australia to Qatar. That's an example that gets drummed up a lot. You look at Qatar; they've got zero income tax, they have free tertiary education, they have very very minimum taxes on their citizens, and it's all from their LNG wealth, their gas. They make so much money out of natural gas that they're able to pay for essentially the social services that we get in Australia, but they're just bought and paid for by the gas industry in Qatar. Now, Australia has overtaken Qatar for gas production in the world. You can look it up and see that we overtook them a couple of years ago, and we're now the world leader in gas production exports.
Yeah, and
And
how come we
yet,
don't have all this free stuff and low
yeah,
taxes?
exactly. Where's our free stuff? And it seems to be just like portioned off into obviously the resource companies themselves are not as taxed as heavily as the I think it comes down to it is nationalized in Qatar. Their gas exports are
Hmm.
nationalized, and so the government is able to claw a lot of wealth out of those exports. Whereas that's not the case here. So we've got two negatives in that our social system is very expensive. Our politicians seem to be highly rewarded, and our gas companies are allowed to keep the private proceeds for their work, which I'm not necessarily against. Like that is the foundation of a
Well,
capitalist system.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure if the politicians are super highly rewarded, but I think there is like a little bit of wise, and especially lately you see the health service, what's it called, the NDHS. I forget the
NDIS.
acronym, NDIS, whatever, and you can see like suddenly like obviously it's going well over budget, and it's like it's like a bit of a gravy train. And it's pretty. I'm sure if it was like Dodge looking at NDIS, we'd find a lot
Yeah,
of
oh, yeah. Well, there has been
like stuff.
some examinations into that where people were buying crypto using their NDIS payments. They were buying sexual services using their NDIS payments. And the
Yeah.
way to look at it is like people are investigating this stuff, and they do see, maybe our individual public servants and politicians aren't particularly highly paid. Although that being said, a lot of the higher ones are. Like in that, I think if you look at the Department of the E-Safety Commissioner, I think there's 10 members of that, the 10 top members of that group, I guess you'd call it institution. They're all paid. They're on $400,000 to $500,000 salaries, and
Yeah.
their role is to censor the Australian public.
Yeah.
They're getting five
Yeah,
hundred
yeah, yeah,
thousand dollar
yeah,
salaries for
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
But to bring it back to Doge and I guess last thing I'll say on Australia is we have a large number of public servants relative to our population. And if you look at our job growth in the last 3 years, it's all been in the public sector and NDIS. That's where all the jobs are being created in the
yeah.
last year or two. Public servants and NDIS. There's no one
Like
actually
including the
producing
private
things.
sector, you're saying. So there's no jobs created in private sector, just public.
Correct. Well, there are some jobs, but it's tiny, and most places are retracting. I think Matt Barry did a good post on Twitter, sort of summarizing it, where he just showed a graph where it's like huge job growth in the public sector, NDIS sector, and education, and then negative job losses in like hospitality and a lot of things that are, you know, more productive in an economy. We've got job growth in unproductive areas of our economy. And the one thing I'll say about this, and then we can go back to Doge and look at the gold stuff, is the one thing I've always questioned, and I hope this is where our investigative journalists are not really doing what they should be, and our media is not doing what they should be, which is asking simple questions as to how come we do have politicians that are able to afford quite nice houses. Like the most obvious one is Albanese, who's on a public servant's wage, and he's just bought it's like a $4 million, $5 million Sydney
Hmm.
house in the last year or so, and he copped a lot of flack for that. And he was like, he hand waved it away and said, "Oh no, it's because of good decision making, good budgeting, blah blah blah." But but it raises questions, right? And I'm sure there's a lot more examples of this. So when you do start to see this Doge stuff come out and all these American politicians, the classic one is the old House leader Nancy Pelosi and her business dealings, her investments that seem to be predicated on a lot of insider information that only a high-placed politician can take advantage of. You do start to question things. And so I'm very excited to see what other information comes out of Doge as they continue to investigate this sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and just to kind of tie it back to Bitcoin, I think if we, when we do get onto the Bitcoin standard, a lot of this kind of overspending is made possible, especially in the United States, because we print the dollar and we can just have endless deficits. And because the money is not real, we just can print it. And like if you have a society, a country based on actual real money with limited scarcity, where you can't just print, it makes it harder to kind of for a government to live beyond its means. It has to kind of balance the budget, because you can't just magically produce Bitcoin. You can print Bitcoin like you can print dollars. So this kind of you can't have this kind of you make it harder to have this kind of waste, because you can just print money, and that money isn't free, because obviously the society pays through it, through higher houses, higher higher cost of housing, high cost of living. Society pays for it. In the end. But Bitcoin would make that harder.
Yes. So maybe we could talk about this after the gold, but let's talk about the gold stuff, and then I want to ask you about moving on to the Bitcoin standard from a government perspective in the light of all this sort of horribleness that's coming out of these audits. So one of the headlines coming out just over the last few days is this talk about Doge and Elon Musk auditing the gold reserves in Fort Knox. So everyone's probably heard of Fort Knox. What people are probably not familiar with is how much gold is supposedly in there, and also probably not familiar with how often that gold gets audited to actually prove that it's there. So supposedly there's $425 billion of gold reserves in Fort Knox in America.
Yeah.
Now, the last time, that's effectively never been properly audited. The last decent, and I say decent in very, very sketchy air quotes, it was in 1974. So we're talking 50 years ago.
Yeah.
They kind of opened their doors a little bit. They opened up one of the vaults of, I think there's 19 or 20 vaults in there, and they were granted, and an audience was granted like a more closer look at one of these vaults to verify the gold was there. Now, from that, in 1974, they said, yep, we can see this one vault is filled with a lot of bars of gold, looks like gold, but there were no checks of serial numbers, there were no checks against logs, there were no, assays to actually prove that the gold is gold and it's not, tungsten filled, gold-plated tungsten-filled bars from China or whatever, or whoever makes counterfeit gold these days. There was nothing like that. So really, there's never been an actual stringent audit of these gold reserves. And so what's been trending on X and a few other places on the internet is calls for Doge to get in there with their army of tech bros and all this sort of thing just to audit the gold. And they're getting Rand Paul, who's a senator over in the States, who's been pushing for this for a long time. He's been fired up, and he's interested in digging in there and seeing what the numbers are actually like.
It'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see if they do have the gold. I guess everybody's curious. I don't know if if it turns out they don't, would the Trump administration actually reveal it? I'm not sure, but
that's the other thing. So even if they got in there and had a look, I would struggle to trust what they said, whether they said it's there or not. I would struggle either way. Even if they say, yep, it's all there, can we believe them?
ultimately, yeah, like we're still responsible for America. So even though if it didn't cause the problem, like if they reveal that, we might not want to reveal that. But yeah. But, should we move on to some other topics, because I think we run out of time.
Sure, no problem. So let's talk a little bit about some of the bigger institutional buy-ins that are happening over the last little bit. So something that was disclosed just on the 14th of Feb was Abu Dhabi. They've disclosed a $436 million stake in BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin ETF, which, ETF Bitcoin, it's problematic. In theory, it is real Bitcoin, but it's an IOU, so it's held by BlackRock. BlackRock has issued an IOU to Abu Dhabi saying, yes, this BlackRock has your name. This Bitcoin has your name on it. So that has concerns there. But what we're seeing is bigger trends towards states and corporations, as well as, old school dinosaur investors putting large sums of money into Bitcoin.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
So that was like the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, and they revealed like
yes,
they bought some previously, and some people saying that there's like they held it already, they just didn't reveal it. They only now
yes,
revealed it. But a lot of Bitcoiners also saying that many other like countries are buying into like Bitcoin. And I think I don't know what the size of that sovereign wealth fund, but I'm pretty sure 460 million is actually pretty small for them. So it's probably almost
sure,
like testing the waters. Um,
yes,
yeah, so it's like, there's probably way more to come. But yeah, it's very interesting. Basically, sovereign wealth fund. It's interesting. Yeah, like basically states are buying Bitcoin. Like states, like Abu
yes,
Dhabi is a holder. Well, not the
yes,
greatest holder. It's like level one. Like when you
yeah,
when you entry level, you're like a beginner, and you're a beginner and you hold it on like a custodial service. So that's level one. Good on
yep,
you. You're in the game, and the next level is you buy some more and you like hold it in a self custodial service. So we still have,
yeah,
we still level one, but well done.
yes. Yeah, and I think that or just some to give you an idea of some other large disclosures. So when Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin in the US, they've doubled their ETF holdings in Bitcoin. They're up to $340 million now of Bitcoin in an ETF. Michigan has disclosed that they have Bitcoin ETF holdings as well. They haven't filed an exact number yet. But there are a lot of states that are kind of on the same path. And so we're starting to see this increase in institutional and state-based adoption. And I think the reason that they're going to keep it quite quiet if they can is because, end of the day, if you're trying to accumulate a large position, it's better for you to keep it under wraps, because obviously if you start this hype chain and all these states and all these institutions start buying in en masse, it's obviously going to drive the price up before people have taken the position or gotten to the position that they want to. And there's lots of theories that the same thing is happening with the U.S. government under Trump. There was a lot of talk about a U.S. based sovereign wealth fund, a Bitcoin sovereign wealth fund, a Bitcoin reserve in the U.S. But the smart play is not to come out, day one or week two or wherever we're in now to the Trump presidency and say, yes, we are going to establish this Bitcoin sovereign wealth fund, and we are going to buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin or whatever number it ends up to be. You want to take your position before the news breaks, not after, because you you don't want to announce that price runs, then you end up with a smaller wealth fund than you could have if you had just started accumulating before you let the alpha get out. So my bet is on lots more states taking positions, not just the ones that we are seeing, not just Abu Dhabi, not just Wisconsin. I think that many states that are looking at this seriously and seeing where things are going and looking at the debts piling up, looking at the things that are uncovered by Doge and just the way that Bitcoin is going, and they're thinking, okay, it's time to get some. We're not going to disclose it until we have to. We're just going to start taking a position.
Yeah, I agree. So what else do we have for the week?
All right. What else can we talk about? Let me just get my list open. Let's talk a little bit about meme coins, because that seems to be a consistent recurring theme. And, as sort of Bitcoin maxis sitting on the sidelines to the whole shitcoin, meme coin horribleness that keeps coming back, it's still good to just kind of, it might seem a bit mean, but it's good to point and laugh and
Yeah, I mean,
realize how
we're not
good it
trying to
is.
laugh at people. We're just trying to educate people.
Yeah, it's good to talk about so that people can, hopefully, if there's a someone looking at these meme coins or these altcoins out there listening to this, they can start to realize, oh, there is a path that, because a lot of Bitcoin maxis, they've gone through this already. They got into the altcoin space, the shitcoin space, years ago, and they've seen the exact same things happen again and again and again and again. And
Yeah,
still,
but yeah, correct.
8 years later, it's still the same thing happening. It's still the same pump and dump schemes, even though it's got bigger names in them, even though it's got, your Trump coin, Melania coin, your hot tour coin, and the one we'll talk about in the moment. The reason I brought this up, the Malay backed Libra coin, which just had a blow up in the market. Even though these coins come attached to these large names, the other one is Portnoy, Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports. He's launched a meme coin, which is also going down the toilet as we speak. People just don't seem to be
obviously,
learning their
I'm
lesson.
not sure. I think you forgot to mention, but obviously there was the Milai coin, like
Yeah,
Javier Milai, or whatever. I don't know if it was called Milai coin, or was that the Libra?
it's called Libra. So let's talk about that
Oh,
one
okay,
now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so there was a coin called Libra. Now it's confusing because some people may remember Facebook attempted to launch their own token years ago. I think it was back in, might have been 20. I can't remember what year that was at this point, but they tried to launch a token called Libra. It's since been rebranded to a different name. It's called like uh, Day or something. It starts with a D, I think. Anyway, Facebook tried to launch a token called Libra. They then rebranded it, and then they since ditched the project because it was, obviously it was just another altcoin scam. Now, not to get sidetracked too much, but an interesting thing about Facebook's Libra token was one of the reasons it was theorized to have been dumped or blocked or whatever was because Facebook's Libra solved the adoption problem by the fact that Facebook is the largest social media network on the planet. And so it actually posed a real threat to the existing financial paradigm and potentially centralized too much power in Facebook, in Meta, if suddenly 2 billion people around the world with a Facebook account suddenly have a digital currency that works. That could realistically solve the adoption problem that a lot of these tokens have. And so that one was kind of moved along quite quickly. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg got a call from, the powers that be and said, hey, don't do this. Anyway, that kind of it kind of muddies the waters a little bit around this latest meme coin, Libra, which has the same name as Facebook's original token. It was launched not too long ago. There's a few. It looks like, because there's one Libra that was launched on October 29, 2004. There's another Libra that was launched on February 15th. Both of them have gone through a pump and dump. So this is kind of the point I want to make on these altcoins. It's just such a muddy landscape that you just don't want to step into it. You're just stepping into a swamp, and you don't know what to expect.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
and that Libra coin, yeah. So it was like, I think the kind of libertarian president
yes,
of Argentina kind of
yep,
promoted it. Whatever. I
Javier
guess
Milei.
some people, yeah, Javier Milei promoted it. I guess some people kind of, worked with him or whatever. And it turns out to be a scam, and now like scam and like the opposition kind of using it against him because people lost money and he's trying to distance himself from it. And
Yes. So what
yeah, I
actually
mean,
happened
yeah.
was this token was launched. It was launched by a company called Kelsia Ventures. So they launched a token, Libra token. Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, libertarian president of Argentina, endorsed it on Twitter. Immediately after his endorsement, the price rose significantly. And then that was when the original holders of the token started running their exit scam and pulled their tokens, made a bunch of money. The price dropped. Javier Milei then deleted his tweet, his ex post, and now he's facing calls for impeachment, particularly based on that tweet, based on that endorsement that he made. It's unclear whether he himself has made money out of the whole ordeal. Possibly, but not sure. Signs point to yes, because there is, like, if you go to their social media page on their Twitter, you can see photos of Milei with the developer, with the guy pushing this token. So he could have made money out of it. We're not sure. But anyway, there are now calls for his impeachment based on this pump and dump, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably knew I got taken advantage of and food. I don't think the money was worth it for him. He was probably sorted, but like he should have known better. Like, and especially he's supposed to be an economics guy. Like he claims he's like this libertarian economics guy, and he got food, and it's a big contrast to the true leader in El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, right? Who, I'm kind of joking about the true leader, but like it shows the kind of wisdom there, where they actually didn't allow these kind of pumps and dumps and scams, and they went Bitcoin only, Bitcoin standard, and and we're doing a good job there, and it kind of it's a contrast of and
it's almost like, if to throw Milei a bone, you compare it to the Trump coin and the Melania coin that was released immediately after Trump took power in the US, and people seem to have forgotten about that already. And this could end quite badly for Milei. So the question is, why does Milei get wrecked and Trump doesn't? With the Trump coin, it has lost a lot of value, but it hasn't gone to effectively zero like Libra has. So I guess Trump just had enough star power and enough name and enough followers behind him to prevent a complete washout of everyone involved, to then result in enough backlash to bring him down with it.
But one thing I would say is, like, I've noticed that there's some awareness about this kind of meme coins and scams going mainstream a little bit. Like on Joe Rogan, we kind of talked about this stuff about Bitcoin and meme coins, like on a recent Joe Rogan episode, and there was kind of this understanding.
Was that the one with Adam Curry?
Yeah. There was Adam. Yeah, that's right. And we talked about it. And it was kind of awareness from Rogan. Oh, yeah, these things are just like gambling, the meme coins, and it's just like pump and dumps and gambling. And it was another kind of podcast, a less popular one I listened to, kind of like a cultural type podcast. And they also kind of were talking about it and like mentioned, and they went Bitcoin, as it was not a Bitcoin podcast, but they also kind of mentioned. So I feel like this kind of awareness of this stuff is actually like going a bit more mainstream. It's kind of penetrating the kind of public consciousness of these meme coins, what they are.
I agree, but there's some danger there in that, it is growing awareness in kind of the normie sphere's minds, but I think the average punter is still, they still don't have that divide in their mind between altcoins, meme coins, and Bitcoin. They'll still kind of lump it all together. So how do you see us solving that
I think that's a lot of people, but I feel like that's also kind of penetrating, because in that Joe Rogan episode, they actually did differentiate, okay, like these pumps and dumps are different from Bitcoin. And that other episode that I mentioned, I think they also kind of were a bit less clearly, but I think they kind of differentiated with like Bitcoin and with these other things which are pump and dump and like this gambling. So I think there is, I feel like it's not fully there yet, but I feel like it's kind of spreading that awareness that Bitcoin is different than some of these like meme coins, pump and dumps. By the way, also like the way they work, like, because again, like the episode, for anybody who wants to listen, it's like Red Scare, it's kind of like a cultural American podcast, but like one of the people is like kind of an actress, like a minor actress, and she talked about how basically somebody, just a group of people, just approached her. Oh, we're gonna, like, I think they even created the coin in her name or something, and like sent her.
Are you talking about the Hawk Tour coin?
No, not Hoktua, like different.
Okay.
But probably the same thing happened with Hoktua. Basically, what happens is these people have like some kind of celebrities, and like somebody else approaches them. Oh, hey, do you want to, like, partner? We're gonna create this coin. Do you want to partner it? And like they'll send them some coins or whatever, and the person like has no idea. Like, oh yeah, sure, why not? Like nothing wrong. And then like, but it's like a pump and dump. But basically, what I'm saying, it's often like these actual celebrities don't really know what's going on. They're actually kind of taking advantage of themselves. Basically, it's basically a scam, and they convince the celebrity to use their kind of reputation. They damage the celebrity's reputation, take advantage to pump that scam. That's kind of basically how it works. Like anybody who has fun, they approach them and like, oh yeah, do you want to create a coin? And
yeah. And sadly, and just to close this off, and then we can move on to some other topics, people need to be prepared for this to keep happening forever. It's not something that's going to go away. Back when, some veteran Bitcoiners may be listening to this now, they explored altcoins and shitcoins when they first got started. They got burned, and then they go Bitcoin only. A lot of people might have thought, oh, this is a fad that will only last for a year or two. But no, it's just kept going and kept going. There'll always be, more people moving through that sort of crypto life cycle before they become Bitcoin maxis. They reach that threshold where they either persist and push forward and become Bitcoiners, or they tap out. They get washed out. They touch the hot stove, but then they drop out completely. And it's sad that happens. But the thing that it's not going to go away. People are going to keep running these scams over and over and over again. And so really all we can do is just do what we can in our sphere of influence, and it is good to see, like on Joe Rogan, he had that conversation with Adam Curry, who is, he gets Bitcoin. He understands it. He's exploring podcasting 2.0 and bringing in Bitcoin features to that, with zaps and instant payments and sat streaming and that sort of thing. And he gets in positions where he can have conversations with people like Joe and give people the real information, not indulge in this altcoin garbage. And so we just need to all do that in our sphere of influence. Wherever we get the opportunity, just keep moving people towards Bitcoin, towards the orange glowing light, and not getting caught up in these bloody scams, which are unfortunately just going to be with us forever. Okay. Anything else on that before we move on to another topic?
Now let's go. Next topic.
Right. Yep. Let's talk about this ABC article. So the ABC recently put out an article on the 11th of Feb talking about Bitcoin or crypto-backed loans in Australia. So it's a little bit of fear-mongering, saying that it might undermine or threaten the Australian economy. And basically it's talking about loans where so traditionally if you go to get a loan with your bank, you're either putting up a decent amount of equity in the form of cash or property. And that's traditionally how you get a loan. And most banks, most traditional dinosaur banks will only issue loans based on those criteria, and that's it. A few edge cases here or there, depending on, if you've got Bank of Mum and Dad or other bits of legacy equity which you can use. But there are institutions coming out now that are offering loans where you can put up crypto as your collateral. So obviously Bitcoin is probably the best one there. It is the best one there, but people are doing it with Ethereum and some of these other tokens which have been around for a bit longer. And it's basically saying that, the article goes to say that this creates risk because, in the ABC's view, these loans are backed by nothing, quote unquote, nothing. And, you could then give them a gotcha and be like, oh, okay, well, what's the Australian dollar backed by? And, you can run circles around them just by asking some simple questions. But anyway, this article goes through that this is happening. People are getting loans backed by crypto, and it could create contagion in the market, which could undermine things if people are no longer able to service their loans. If, say, you take out a massive loan backed by equity in Ethereum, and then the Ethereum price crashes to zero, or if something like the Celsius situation
well, not even zero. If it drops if it drops a lot by a very significant, it drops to 20% of its value, then people, might create some liquidity issues, and where people would have to put up more collateral or something.
Yes. So anyway, the reason that this article has come out is because they're obviously watching what's happening in the US, where regulation is looking to become more positive in light of crypto regulation in the US, particularly in reference to, and a good piece of evidence of that is the repealing of SAB 121, which is Staff Accounting Bulletin 121, which basically opens the way for financial institutions in the US to have looser rules in regards to holding crypto balances for their customers and for their banking and business operations in the US. They're kind of seeing that happening in the US, and they're like, okay, well, what does this mean for Australia? And the ABC is taking a bit of a combative look and saying, look, if the more that we do this, the more we're opening ourselves up to financial contagion.
Yeah, basically the risk is, the premise is, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are very volatile, which is fair enough, but it's true. And because of that, we need regulation or probably not allow that because it could create contagion and it's a risk. So let's not allow it. Yeah. One thing that's okay, sorry. One thing that one point is we do mention this. It's the service, like the main service that does it in Australia. That's promoting it now. It's a new service called Vend. Viewed is the service in Australia. And okay, so one thing. Okay, sure. Bitcoin is risky, and it going down, that's a risk. But and they do mention that in the article. To be fair to them, Viewed, for example, has a loan to value ratio of 50%, much higher. Normally, but normally you put property as collateral, and your loan for you get it's 5-10% or whatever. I'm not sure exactly, but something around that. But they have a pretty high loan to value ratio, 50%. So it kind of to take account that it's a more risky asset, more volatile asset. So we do kind of take that into account. One thing I took kind of I didn't like about the article is, they quoted Bayani in it. Bayani, is somebody we know personally. He's the head of Australian Bitcoin industry body, and they quoted him as somebody who lost money in a service like that, associate that existed, and they kind of share his story how he lost money, and then they use that to kind of make the case that it's risky and such, and we need regulations or restrictions on it. And it's a bit dishonest of them because I spoke to Bayani, and like that story is true, but he doesn't actually support their conclusion. He's like a pro-Bitcoin guy, and he thinks people should be able to do. He lost money, but it was like it was a risk he was willing to take, and it was like, it wasn't all his money. It was like a moderate risk. He lost it. He's still there. He's still buying Bitcoin, and he wants to be able to like use his money and sometimes take risks on it and do things with it. And he doesn't support the conclusion. Like they're saying, like you wouldn't know this from the article they're saying, because it would make him sound like a victim, and anybody would think like, oh, I'm sure Bayani would be for this thing, but no, Bayani like actually doesn't support the kind of conclusion that we're trying to push. So it's a bit misleading like that, and obviously like it's true, like, okay, Bitcoin is volatile. There's some risk of that. So, but the service, like I said, it does have that loan to value ratio pretty high to account for that risk. And like people should be able to take risk their own money. And this is what, because I spoke to Bayani, and this is what he said, like, he doesn't want buyouts. If he fails, he doesn't expect buyouts. He doesn't want like, okay, if it fails, don't buy us out. Like, don't buy the business out. If vendor fails, don't like let people lose their money. We're happy, but if you want to take a risk, let us take a risk. If you want to do something, let us do it.
Yeah, he clearly understood the risks involved, and I think that's the main thing. There needs to be this informed consent. You understand the risks involved with doing loans backed in this manner, and end of the day, what seems to be the angle of this article is, they're coming from an abundance of caution, but I'm always a bit skeptical, because the system that could come from the rise of Bitcoin-backed loans it's a more decentralized loan system. You no longer have this chokehold of lending being held by big dinosaur financial institutions. You can now go, Daniel, I've got one Bitcoin here. I want to take out a loan to buy a house. I'll lock up my one Bitcoin in escrow to you, and we can have this agreement, and you will accept the risk. It's a trade off between the risks as me to pay back that loan, service that loan, but then you're also considering how much is Bitcoin worth and what might the price be when that loan comes due. But we can have that conversation, and that's kind of this future we want to get towards, where people can be self-sovereign, have the tools and have the technology at their disposal to be able to make informed decisions based on their particular circumstances, and not be beholden to the list of checks and balances by these dinosaur institutions who hold the levers of power and everything. And so articles like this are kind of trying to head that off of the pass and be like, no, we can't explore this at all. It's too risky.
Yeah,
we shouldn't let people make their own decisions.
And you say they came from an abundance of caution, and that might be true for some people. But honestly, I'm a bit cynical about human nature, and especially with the slightly misleading why they quoted Bayani. I feel a lot of this is they don't like Bitcoin. Maybe they didn't invest in it, they never believed in it, and they don't like that it's successful. And we're using this, like, it's like, oh, save the kids. We need to. It's like this type of argument, like. Yeah. It's like they're just trying to put restrictions on Bitcoin because they don't necessarily like it, but they don't want to do that, so they cover it up in this do-gooder excuse. Oh, it's too risky. It could cause contagion. We're putting everybody at risk, so let's restrict it. But really, they just don't like it because maybe they were wrong and they don't think it should exist. And I'm a bit cynical like that. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't be.
Well, I agree with your cynicism is correct, but I think it will slowly come out of this as certain countries kind of lead the way. It might be the US, might be El Salvador, might be some other countries. Czech Republic is a good one that's kind of leading the way a little bit. Obviously, they're constrained by the EU over at the top of them, but individually, they're making some good moves in regards to Bitcoin and self-sovereignty. And I think that as we get more success stories coming out of these countries, then hopefully countries like Australia will start to follow suit. They'll start to see, oh, look, they're actually creating a lot of wealth for their citizens. They're increasing their freedoms, and they're not blowing themselves up through financial contagion and all the stuff that they fearmonger about. So I definitely don't think we'll be the first. We won't lead the way in this regard. Our government is definitely one that plays follow the leader with other countries. But I'm optimistic long term that as we see
No,
these success stories happen elsewhere, we'll start to follow suit.
yeah, and I agree. We are kind of follow the leader, but it's already actually happening. Where, and you have this as one of the kind of the stories, like where I think Treasurer Jim Chalmers,
Mm,
kind of made some very pro Bitcoin. Kind of he suggested using it more, like
mm,
Bitcoin in Australia's financial system, and came out with some pro Bitcoin talking points and like following
mm,
kind of example in the United States. So I think, unfortunately, sometimes, Australia could be a bit more innovative and less conservative with these things, but
mm.
it is what it is. And but we do follow the leader, and that's it seems to be
Yeah,
already happening.
yeah, that's it. All right.
Yeah.
We could just blitz through some other topics and get some quick comments from you and see what you reckon.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Let's go.
Great. So, what's some other stuff we got in here? So, South Korea is looking at lifting its institutional trading ban on Bitcoin crypto assets. So, back in 2017, South Korea banned all corporate crypto trading based on the classic, money laundering concerns and all this sort of thing, similar to discussions that are happening in Australia. But they are now looking to pull themselves out of that. So in 2025, by the end of the year, they're going to be running a pilot program allowing corporations to do some limited crypto things. Does seem to be quite restrictive, in that it's mostly about selling down crypto back into fiat currency, so the South Korean won. So it is kind of baby steps, but my hunch is that this is off the back of seeing particularly the US's positive stance towards crypto is causing these other countries that have made these knee jerk regulatory decisions to start to creep back towards, okay, maybe there is something here. So that's an interesting one coming out of South Korea. Um, Next one, US Customs and Border Protection are seizing Bitcoin mining ASICs. So this is an interesting one. It was quite surprising when I saw it, considering generally positive sentiment coming out of the new Trump administration towards the crypto space. Um, but yeah, just on February 13th, there was a story that broke talking about seizure of ASIC mining. So the computers that basically do mining, they process the hashing algorithm to run the Bitcoin network, have been seized by US Customs and Border Protection. Approximately $5 million worth of equipment was seized. So it's interesting that this has happened. I didn't expect something like this to be happening while all the positive sentiment was flying around. Um, okay, we'll move on to the next one. Coinbase users lose over $300 million per year to social engineering scams. So there was an analyst called Zach XPT that came out recently with a report, basically just analyzing losses on, particularly looking at Coinbase users, and he basically determined that there's about $300 million worth US dollars lost every year by Coinbase users to different kinds of scams, particularly social engineering scams. So for people unfamiliar with what that means, that's like what could be called a romance scam or an inheritance scam, or similar ones where people will call up pretending that they're a long lost lover from overseas, and they need some help. They need you to send them some Bitcoin or send them some crypto so that they can get out of jail, or they'll some old person's nephew will call them up and say, "Hey, do you remember me? It's little Johnny. I'm in prison in the Philippines. I need some Bitcoin to get myself out of here." So people are falling for these social engineering scams. So I thought it was worth mentioning. Just always check yourself, and they're becoming more sophisticated now in the world of AI. chatbots and LLMs that can craft very sophisticated narratives in emails and text messages and that sort of thing, and even video calls. Always be checking yourself. Don't just be sending Bitcoin to random, people overseas. Do you have any comments on scams, Daniel?
No, no, I'm just curious. Is this like talking about scams as in because Coinbase uses lose? I'm just curious if it's talking about scams as in like just normal people who aren't into Bitcoin get scammed, whether like if we're not even aware maybe that we're buying Bitcoin or whatever. This type of scams, or is this like scams where people are holding like the crypto or whatever, they invest in some crypto and they don't have it self-custodial wallet and they're just holding their crypto on Coinbase, and then through like some kind of scam phishing attempts, their Coinbase account essentially gets hacked. Like, do you know what I'm saying? The difference? I wonder which ones it's referring to. I'm just a bit curious. It's not quite, because there's a subtle difference there, like one's basically like somebody who invests in crypto, we know what we're doing, they invest in crypto and suddenly they get scammed where they get access to the Coinbase account, and one is like they might not even know what we're doing and they just get scammed like from the beginning. Maybe they didn't even want to invest.
It seems to be a mix. It seems to be a mix of people getting their Coinbase account itself scammed, as in they lose access to their Coinbase account, someone else gets into it, and is then able to siphon off some crypto to other wallets. So yeah, that does seem to be the primary one. But then also, and it's through social engineering means as well that people are losing access or sharing access to their Coinbase account. Yeah, it does reference things like SIM swap attacks, old API keys, platform bugs, and other things which suggest a failing of the platform itself.
No, yeah. Basically, like that suggests like the actual Coinbase account got hacked. Yeah, I find that interesting because, like when talking to new people, a lot of people have this misconception, or I'll just keep a lot of people do that. They keep their crypto on an exchange. Because we're very sure holding self-custody on an exchange. A lot of people think, Coinbase, we know security and things like that. And so I'll keep it on Coinbase. Like, not understanding that, like, even if Coinbase doesn't get hacked, your Coinbase account, you could get hacked and your Coinbase account could get hacked. And like, because at the end of the day, Coinbase, it's like credentials, right? And if you have... like that's why something like cold storage or hardware wallet is actually better, because like when you have it on Coinbase, there's the risk of Coinbase getting hacked and there's the risk of your Coinbase account getting hacked. There's two risks. If you hold it in self-custody, there's only the risk really of your custodial wallet getting hacked, but it's much harder to hack a custodial wallet than a person's Coinbase account. So even then it's low risk. And like, so I'm trying to get that the risk people, because I often hear that like new users think, I was started on Coinbase, we know what, or like some other big exchange, we know the security and to be safe there. But no, like you shouldn't hold it on an exchange, you should hold it in self-custody.
Correct. Yeah, it's basically, the story is just a big indictment of leaving coins on the exchange, and just, as always, encourage people to pull their coins off the exchange into self-custody, and kind of going through that process of understanding how it works, how to take self-custody and how to do it securely, kind of educates people on the threats of scams and how to avoid them. And so just going through that piece of education and then the act of taking self-custody reduces your chance of getting scammed in any of the myriad ways available for scammers. Because basically it just reduces your attack surface.
Yeah, I mean, the social engineering scams is basically hacking. Like people got stole. That's what it seems to be. Yeah. But anyway, I feel like we're kind of around the 1 hour mark. I know we have some news stories, but I think maybe we should like finish up for today. What do you think?
Sure, no problem. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mike, for getting these stories ready, and I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with some more of the latest news. Thanks, everyone, and talk to you next time.
Great. No worries. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks.
Australian Bitcoin podcast, presented by HardBlock, Australia's first Bitcoin-only exchange.